Thanks, fellas.
Can
Yes.
everyone, you can see my screen, everybody?
Need a more casual one of you, Les. It's a bit formal and informal, isn't it?
I don't know where I got the shirt from. I must have borrowed it.
No, I didn't say you'd never seen you in a collared shirt in your life. Oh.
So today our question and answer session is on part B. We've got Trevor Clements with us again, our training and development principal, and Les Ryder, whose hair has grown since the photo, and he's head of major projects and our high-rise specialist. So we've had your questions in. Thank you. So we're going to get through those. We've had a few more late in, so we'll just keep an eye on the time and see if we can get all the questions that we've had in covered. But if we don't, we will respond to you privately. So let's make a start.
So are you reading it out or should I?
Les, could you read it out for me, please?
I'll read it out just to prove
Thank
that
you.
people from the northeast can read. Is that what it
yeah.
is? I know what you say. Right, where flats are increased in height by the addition of one or more stories, resulting in a story height of 11 meters, or greater than 11 meters, I should say. My understanding is that, amongst other things, the whole building is required to be fitted with sprinklers. That was the first question. There's another question that kind of that was submitted that's related. We're going to try and answer them at the same time. And that's what happens when the existing owner occupier on floors below refuse to have sprinklers fitted? Are we to advise that the project is not viable? Okay, well, what I'll do, I'll go into a quick reasoning of why the new floor, the new building, sorry, the existing building is affected by the addition of the new one. If you can give me the next slide, Rich. Right, so this relatively simple, and all revolves around Regulation 3, and an extra floor is an extension. I think we can all agree with that. So that's the extension part. So the new floor is the extension, so that needs to comply. The work would also be a material alteration to the existing building, and a material alteration where contravenes or makes worse in relation to regulation requirement, I should say, A1, which is loading structure, B1, means of warning and escape, B3, internal fire spread, B4, external fire spread, or B5, which is access for the fire brigade. So we check the new extension, the new floor, for its entirety in relation to the regulations, and we only check the existing floor in relation to those items there, providing that no extra work's being done. Obviously, if you're putting in new services, control services into the existing, then we would check that too. So the sprinkler provisions are contained within the guidance of B3. So B3, internal fire spread, is what effectively picks up the sprinklers. And so therefore, if you just pop on 2 slides, Rachel, just miss the next one out and go to the next one. Yeah, so that's effectively the part of the approved document that picks all of that up. So if you look at 7.4, where blocks of flats, top story more than 11 meters, should be fitted with a sprinkler system in accordance with Appendix E, which is effectively BS 59251 for the domestic residential sprinklers, or BS 12845 if you don't like water and you like lots of tanks in your system, you would go for that second one. And there was the main, those changes was 2020. I think they came in November of 2020, and it changed the trigger height from 30 meters to 11. Now, there's a bit of a problem here, because what ended up happening is, in terms of alignment of documents, this changed, but BS 9991 did not. And we're still waiting for the new 991 to be published. and that will fully align everything. So we've got the new 9251, which was a sprinkler code, that's been updated. That was updated last year, 2021 version, and it only leaves 9991 to be, which is the code of practice for means of for fire safety in residential buildings to be updated, and then we all in alignment. But at the moment it's a little bit out of alignment. Yeah, Rach, if you can go back and another slide. Now that's a typical building that we've approved all over the country for that's under 11 meters. It's defined as a small building. So it basically means that if there's only 2 flats per floor and there's 4 floors, then you don't need a protected lobby. Because what you would probably expect there is you'd come up the stairs into a lobby and then from the lobby into the stairs. But for up to 11 meters and there's 2 flats per floor, that's absolutely fine. The problem is you stick another floor on that and take that above 11 meters. Not only does it create a problem in relation to the sprinklers, where the building does need to be sprinkled in its entirety, you also need to find a way of lobbying the stairs, and 9 times out of 10 it would be very difficult. Now in that situation there, you see where the lift is. If that lift wasn't there, or if you took the lift out, which you couldn't do under Part M, or 99% chance you couldn't do, then you could form the lobby in that area and that would comply with that aspect of it. So the sprinklers is not the only aspect which can cause problems with these permitted, the more or less permitted, the close to being permitted development. The conditions on the permitted development of medium-rise extensions is almost the same as material planning considerations. So it's still a tough permission to obtain. But like I say, having said that, the other aspect that can cause problems is making a protected lobby where a protected lobby previously didn't exist. So, you know, as you can imagine, you know, where I've just said on the left-hand side, those are the four requirements that the existing building would have to be taken into account. And of course, you wouldn't think about putting an extra floor on a building and without checking the foundations, and there one would pick the foundations up in the existing structure. The other aspect you've got to keep an eye on is B5, because it may turn out that the building does not have a dry riser. You see, in this case, it does, but a lot of those small buildings didn't need a dry riser because the hose length from the rear of the fire appliance would reach 45 meters to the extremity of any parts of the flat. You know, you stick another story on there and that might change, in which case you may need to put a dry riser on there as well. So not just the sprinklers can be a problem, the lobby can be a problem as well, because you may not have the space. And the dry riser are lesser of a problem because you could see how you could fit one of them in, to be fair. And I think in this particular case, you can see it's been identified in as an additional work. Okay, if you on to the next one, Rach. So, oh, sorry, go back to the original. I'll go back to the original question on my bit. And it's what the other part of the question said is, what happens when the existing owner occupies on floors but refuse to have sprinklers fitted? Are we advised to advise the project is not viable? Possibly is the answer. The other option may be a fire engineering approach, I should say. And we've had the situations occur where we've had pressurized staircases being proposed and are still in the consideration loop at the moment, so to speak. But if our philosophy is all the way through is we're looking for a safe building. That's what we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for the prescriptive parts of all of the regulations to be applied with, rigorously. If somebody can come up with a fire engineered approach that would ensure that the building would be as safe as a prescriptive one, then we would always be open to look at that. And that completes that question, Rach, I think. Or do I slip onto the next? That we've got another one, haven't we, after that? That's it. Nothing more to add on that, Trev, do you, really?
It is a big problem, isn't it, with this sort of development, that fire safety can be a stumbling block, as you say. I came across a case a little while ago when I was on the LABC technical working group, where there was a shops at ground floor level with flats above, and the additional story took it above 11 metres. And the question was, should they need to put sprinklers in the shop, which would have been a stumbling block. And I think what was discussed, it wasn't in our patch, by the way, but what we agreed was that because there was an imperforate compartment floor at first floor level, separating that separate use, it would be unreasonable to absolutely insist on sprinklers in at least at ground floor level, although it was upheld that sprinklers should be put in all the flats. And of course, permissions from the existing leaseholders can cause untold problems that can scupper the project. There you go. That's my 4 penneth.
Yeah, cheers, Trev. Thanks. And the second one, which is more or less this, kind of all linked in together, I suppose. If existing owners, occupiers could be persuaded to have an automated suppression system fitted instead, due to less potential disruption, would you consider this to have an equivalence to the sprinklers installed to 9251, the standard referred to in ADB Appendix E? Right, equivalency between sprinklers and mist systems is very, very difficult to ascertain. What I'm gonna talk about just for a couple of minutes is there's a huge difference between sprinklers, the way that sprinklers suppress fires and the way that mist systems suppress fires. A sprinkler system predominantly reduces the fuel. We've all seen the fire triangle, and basically what the sprinkler system does, the sprinkler will wet dry combustible material and make it into wet non-combustible material, and hence that goes along with suppression, because suppression is to suppress the fire, not necessarily extinguish it. So the removing the fuel will suppress the fire, and theoretically sooner or later it may well extinguish itself. That's how sprinklers work, and of course it takes away the other aspect of the fire triangle, which is heat. So yes, it does that too, but not to the same extent as it removes the fuel. Mist systems, on the other hand, are oxygen depletion systems. So what happens with a mist system is it's the only suppression system that's geared by the fire itself. So the bigger the fire, the more steam that is made, and the more that the steam will then displace the oxygen down to about 12–14%, so combustion can't take place. So that's why mist systems are not the best at small fires, because they don't create enough steam, and therefore they don't suppress the fire as well as if it's a larger fire. And a certain amount of experiments have been made where it's actually been more effective to increase the temperature of the activation of the mist system than it would be if it would normally activate at 57 degrees. If it activated at 57 degrees in this particular test, took about 2.5 minutes to fully suppress the fire. Where if they took it up to 68 degrees, it suppressed the fire quicker. So what the whole point of that is to identify that mist systems and sprinkler systems operate completely different. sprinkler systems are predominantly prescriptive. So how many sprinkler heads you need, how far apart they need to be, etc. is the sprinkler system. The mist system is all done by test, full-scale testing. And that's the big difference between the two. If you go on to the next slide, Rich. Okay, this is straight from Automist's website, and I completely agree with it. And it says Automist's smart scan suitable to be used in any application where 8458 compliant water mist system is deemed to be acceptable as a code compliant water fire suppression system. Now that really is key. And what I'm now going to do, I'm going to now move on to the two codes, the old code and the new code, which theoretically should be published shortly. If you go on to the next one. Now that, don't even try and read that. The whole point of that slide is just to identify the table 2 on the right hand side is the current BS 9991, and on the left hand side is the aligned, like I said, aligned ADB draft 9991. And the whole point of that is just to identify that that these tables have lots of situations down the left hand side that identify where the suppression is necessary. Then it says, well, what systems appropriate for a sprinkler, what domestic sprinkler, what systems appropriate for a commercial sprinkler, and what system is suitable for water mist. Now, water mist is not applicable in quite a few situations. If you go to the next slide, Rich, and this is the crux of the matter, to be fair. I've taken the bits that's relevant. Now, the current 9991 is not aligned. It's still on the 30-meter set point that the old ADB was. The new aligned 9991 aligns itself to the new 11-meter rule, and of course the 18-meter rule, which would then make it a regulated building. And 45 don't quite get 45. It just changes the sprinkler categories, because all the sprinklers have different categories. So if you look in the draft aligned BS 9991, you'll see building over 11 meters. So a sprinkler system, a 9251, should be a category 2 or a category 3, which is a 30-minute system. Or if it's to 12845, which is a more rigorous non-domestic system, the commercial system, that's OH1, which is a 60-minute duration. The 9251 is a 30-minute duration. But the next paragraph, the next line in the table is the most applicable. If you notice that the water mist is not applicable. So for buildings over 11 meters, water mist isn't applicable. And that's the reason why we wouldn't consider water mist a particular solution in this particular case. Water mist is really good in a lot of circumstances, but it is limited. It was limited in the 2015 code, and it looks if it's going to be limited in the 2022 code. So it's not new thinking. They just don't see the powers that be, who have much, who we listen to, just don't think that it's applicable for many reasons, because it's very difficult to get any kind of good resilience out of water mist. But it's still a good system, and if it's designed properly in the right circumstances, it's really good. Next slide, Rich. What we like for time? What we like for time, Trevor? We're
tracking. We need to be concise.
Okay, that's cool.
We've got
okay.
Yeah.
If there's one document you need to get hold of if you're thinking about using an water mist system, is this one. It's produced by the Welsh government, And if you type in Welsh Government and water mist system, that you'll pick up this document. It's 37 pages. It's a lot less than the code, and it just identifies all the important points relating to the test data I was talking to, and now they're talking about now the test data is establishes the nozzle locations, the spacings, the flow, all the stuff that you would need to do to design a water mist system to comply. Okay, that's me done. Les, Trev, got anything on that one?
No, nothing to add on that, Les. I'm glad you answered that question. You're definitely the man for it. Yeah, I'll take this easy one. So where a warehouse has ancillary accommodation, and this is 2 stories and above, do you count the 1/5 area of the footprint of the accommodation or the combined floor areas? So there we're talking about, as we, I know not everybody in the audience is building control, but people probably realise that there are purpose groups in the building regulations, depending on what the use of the building is, whether it's a residential building or an industrial building or a shop or an office. And you need compartmentation if you have separate uses in the same building. You have fire compartmentation between those uses, unless they can be classed as what are termed ancillary, and hence the question. So Rachel, we can have a slide, and I'll show you what approved document B volume 2 states. And as you can see, it says where a building or compartment has more than one use, it is appropriate to assign each different use to its own purpose group, i.e. need compartmentation in the following situations. If the ancillary use is as a flat, well, that's an obvious one. But B, if both the following apply: the building or compartment has an area of more than 280 square meters, and the ancillary use relates to an area that is more than 1/5 of the total floor area of the building or compartment. So I've not answered the question yet, have I? I've just given a background to it. The easy answer to the question is we take that on total floor area, not on the sort of plan area of the building. So it is the actual floor area measured at every level, and that the calculation is done from that. And the only other thing to say about that is that applies to most buildings, but if it's a shop and they've got some sort of storage areas within the shop, then that can be up to 1/3 of the total floor area before you need to treat it as a separate purpose group and look for compartmentation. So yeah, I think that's me answered. Les, anything I got wrong there, or you want to chip in on? No.
It was interesting. The only court case I've ever been involved with was on that particular aspect, where an
interpretation thing.
Yeah, and we took a major electrical retailer to court because they didn't want a compartment between the shop and the storage.
Oh.
And eventually, and it was sorted out in a courtroom in Ashford, Kent, and everything was agreed in the room. And then we went back into the courtroom and withdrew the charges.
All right.
So yeah, that was interesting. That.
Right, that's that. On to the next, and back to you, Les, I think.
Yeah, well, this is much of a muchness on the last, and issue crops up regular. It's different. Like I said before, I don't know how we could interpret it different. Like I said if we go back to that first slide, Rich, the first slide that we. It's more or less that. It's the extra floors and extension. I don't think anybody could claim it isn't. The work would also be a material alteration of the existing building. That's not. I don't think you could really argue about that. A material alteration is where a building contravenes or is made worse in terms of those cases. Well, if it's got more load on it, then it would be worse. So you'd have to check it out. People will have to escape further, so a means of escape would be applicable. Increasing the size of the building may increase the fire resistance, generally doesn't on residential until you get really high. So the fire resistance may increase. B4, depending upon what you put above, may affect it, but because it's heavily compartmented, it's unlikely to affect B4 if it's similar to all of the facades of the lower floors. And of course, like I said, B5, if you put an extra floor on, and then all of a sudden you can't get the hose length. So I can't see how you couldn't consider it a material alteration, and the sprinkler provisions are contained within the guidance for B3. So again, I can't see how it can be different, but I'm more than interested to hear different interpretations, because I think that's one thing we've all got to be in any form of, in any form of regulatory capacity. We need to be able to listen to all sides and be flexible where we can, and to ensure that but the most important thing is we ensure that the building as finished, as complete, is safe. That's the most important, but there's many ways to achieve that. So yeah, I think that more or less, and we went through the rest of that. I don't know if Trevor got anything on that one.
Well, it was an issue we said to the government was going to cause confusion. We said they should make it quite clear what will happen where a building is increased in height, but they chose not to make it emphatically clear in the legislation. But the decision around the table of everybody was, it is increasing the risk. We're protecting the risk to that new extra floor. And to do that, we need to apply the regulations as they are to the whole building and protect their risk that's presented by the lower floors. So yeah, I agree with you, Les. That's
I think it's
how it's played out.
If you're putting an extension onto a warehouse building, and the travel distance went from 20 meters to 50 meters, then it's a material alteration. So if you apply the theory in different fields, you'll always, my opinion is, you'll always come up with the same answer.
So we're on number 5 now. So that's
I've got that one. Is it all right? Will hotels be added to the list of relevant buildings over 18 meters with the same ban on combustible materials at the envelope as domestic relevant buildings? And the answer, and pop a slide, Rach. And the answer is yes. It used to be, hotels and hostels used to be within a little bit of a exclusion of regulation 7.4, and now any building with a floor height of greater than 18 meters with sleeping accommodation becomes a relevant building, and therefore the facade, the external wall, is limited to A2 materials. In the same amendments to the regulations, which these are regulations. You've got to realize with regulation 7 is a regulation. We've got no flexibility on regulation 7. So if a building is 18 meters and 50 millimeters, we haven't got the ability to say, no, don't worry, it's 50 millimeters. We're not worried about 50 millimeters, like what we might say on guidance. We haven't got that. We haven't got that power. The only thing that, if you thought it was unreasonable, the only thing you could do then is apply for a relaxation, and that's, that may be worth doing, because it may well be unreasonable if the floor level is 18.005. But that's important aspect to know the difference between regulations and guidance, which is contained with the approved document and ADB. But the exemption list also extended to include fiber optic cables. Somebody who's obviously very pedantic there and said, only electric cables are exempted, but that's a fiber optic cable. That's much, so they've obviously, that's obviously been a bit of an issue. So they've removed that. and insulation and DPCs up to 300 millimeters above ground level. Obviously, if you have bits of slope in ground level, but again, it's very, very difficult for people to be reasonable. You know, if the fiber optic cables not exempted, then theoretically it's either got to be non-combustible, or alternatively you've got to apply for relaxation. And solar shading's been added to the areas that require to be minimum A2 material as well. As you can imagine, you know, the new Part O and the overheating aspects of Part O, I think we're going to see a lot more solar shading being added here, there and everywhere to prevent overheating of residential buildings. And that's it. Anything else, Trev?
No, that's a good answer. 10 out of 10.
Thanks, man. My mum will be pleased.
Yeah, I'll send you a good report at the end of the term, I promise. So, right, back to me. Would building control agree a timber frame construction with a combustible cladding worse than BS3D2 fire rating within 1 metre of the boundary would not count towards the unprotected area, provided the cladding is treated with a Class O coating? Right, well, once again, I'm going to go for the non-building control people. I'll go into the base background behind the question. So if you have a slide up, Rachel. This is about unprotected area, requirement B4, that is intended to prevent fire spread between buildings. So we don't want any, when there's a fire in a building, we don't want it to pass fire towards the boundaries and increase the temperature so that fire can spread from one building to the other. Now, what do we class as unprotected area when we're tallying up the limits that are allowed depending on the proximity of the building to the boundary? Well, unprotected areas, most people know, are areas of wall that don't have the requisite fire resistance, which is usually 30 minutes for a dwelling. So that would be your doors and your windows and things like that. But there is also, as you see in 13.7, not only those areas, but where a fire resisting external wall, so it might have the 30 minutes fire resistance, but if it has a surface material that is worse than Class B S3 D2 and is more than 1 millimetre thick, then you also class that as an unprotected area, equating to half of its area. And a new slide there, Rach, please. I think we're just showing, yeah, that's really showing, which doesn't really need a diagram, does it? You look at the whole area and you take it as 50% of that when you do your calculation. So I think is there another slide? I'm not sure. Click on, no, well, that's just a complete answering that then. So the question was saying, if we treat it to Class O, well, first thing, let's say Class O is obsolete. We are talking about Class B S3 D2, the Euro fire class now in regulations. So in terms of that, if we treat that cladding, often it's timber cladding, isn't it? It's in a rural area and people want some sort of shiplap or feather edge board. If we treat that to be, let's say, Class B, can we then discount it as being unprotected area? You can, but the big problem that comes up time and time again is building control are going to ask you to not only prove that the treatment that you use has been independently tested by an accredited body, and by that I mean a UCAS accredited laboratory, to achieve the fire rating, but also to do it in a durable way. In other words, it's been accelerated age tested and can still achieve that fire performance after 10 years exposure to UV light and weather and everything that goes with it. And generally speaking, that's where these products fall down. And the only products we've ever found that will achieve it are pressure impregnated products that are supplied by a sort of a licensed supplier. So you have to buy the boards ready treated from these licensed suppliers. And I think there's very few now. There was a product that was very popular that was found to be too toxic, so I think was effectively banned. But talk to building control, talk to your building control surveyor, and if you've got something in mind, but have in mind you will be asked for that background information to prove that the product you're using will meet Regulation 7 in terms of fitness of materials. That's me. Have I, out of 10, Les, what do you reckon?
Oh,
Enough?
see, I'm astounded. No comment.
Well, good. Yeah, Mutual Appreciation Society going on here. That's all good. Is this me as well? Yes. Loft conversions, stairs open to the ground floor. As per 9991, with a separation at first floor level and automatic water fire suppression system. Does the suppression system need to be throughout the building, as the BS seems to suggest, or just the risk room on the ground floor? Right. Is there a slide attached to this? I should remember. Rach, let's have a little test to see if there's something that could you bump on? Yes. So yeah, what I'm showing there is that the requirements in 9991, which you see top left, in 2, it says exactly that a fire suppression system to the open plan area is the phrase, together with a fire resisting partition and door to separate the ground floor from the upper story. So what it's clear is it can only be to the open plan area, and there is I think there's a text in the British standard for the sprinkler systems to say that whilst a system should usually cover the whole building, if it's agreed with building control as part of a specific fire safety strategy, it is permitted to only limit it to certain areas. So we exploit that and follow the BS, and you'll see it's also clear in the approved document below. Very similar text. It says that the sprinkler protection can be to the open plan areas, and again, ADB picks up on the point that smoke can spread from the place of origin, i.e. if the open plan area is where the fire breaks out, before the sprinklers cut in, you can get early stage smoke that can prejudice the escape route from the second floor to the first floor via the escape windows, which is always going to be the emergency escape route if you can't get through the ground floor. So there's that requirement to separate off that escape route from the ground floor so that early stage smoke can't get into that route and prejudice it. And that usually means either at ground floor level or first floor level, you're going to be putting a fire door in there to cut it off from the ground floor. So there you go. That hopefully answers that question. Tell me if not.
I think one thing that's incredibly important in situations like that, Trevor, is how important that door is between the ground and the first floor, and it's got to be reiterated to the client that must be closed at night, because that may be the difference between not so much getting in or out, but there's a possibility. Let's say it was open. The door was open, the suppression won't kick in until 57 or 68 degrees. The smoke can only go one way. It'll use the staircase as a smoke reservoir, and of course then it compromises the escape route, and so that door is absolutely key. And I think I'm convinced what some people will do, they'll put the door on, and then as soon as everybody disappears, they'll take it off. And it's like, it is so key to the strategy. It's probably more important than the sprinklers.
Right. Yeah. No. Very good point. It is it's a very important feature. Right. Well, we're doing good for time. That's good. So this one's down to me as well, and it is: what is the progress on approving the inclusion of laminated glass as a barrier for example, included in balustrades? So this is all to do with the Regulation 7 ban on combustible materials in scope buildings, being residential buildings over 18 metres. And as Les has just said, the scope of those buildings has just been slightly expanded in the most recent changes. And right from the start, we were all scratching our heads. This was one of many problems thrown up by Reg 7. You know, certain combustible elements of a typical multi-story block of flats. It was very hard to make them non-combustible. Things like cavity trays, which has been recognised, and there's now an amnesty on that. Things like boiler flues, which have got plastic components that might pass through the wall and thereby be prohibited. And laminated glass was another one of those. And there was lots of discussion. In fact, it was part of a recent government consultation on the ban on combustible materials. Rachel, could you put another slide up for us? And there it is. There's the government consultation, and there's the response to question 9A. Do you agree that laminated glass in a balcony construction should continue to have to achieve A2, S1, DO classification or A1? And you'll see that the response they got was pretty split down the middle, and some said they agree, and some said they don't agree. And I think there were lots of other comments about, you know, how can it be a risk? You know, we're allowing windows to be exempted, and of course they're going to be laminated glass in most cases, and yet we're getting excited about the risk presented by balcony balustrades. However, this was the outcome that you see at the bottom there, and the comment from the government in their final report, and it's pointing out that they're taking at the moment, they're taking research on the use of laminated glass in balconies, which will provide the necessary evidence to allow the department to make an informed decision on whether it should be exempted or not. So they're sitting on the fence still. They're getting the boffins to look into a bit to find out if it does actually pose a fire risk, and then we'll take action in the future. But at the moment, they are going to continue to require laminated glass to achieve class A2 or better in a balcony. So we at HBC, I asked this question of Les because he deals with all our major projects. We're not aware of any products that definitely can meet that standard. I think there's a few have come close, but we're not aware of any. But we're open-minded to anybody who wants to put something to us to look into it. But again, as with the last question, we do need the accredited test results that are relevant to show that it would be able to achieve that fire rating in normal circumstances and be durable. So there you go. That's hopefully a comprehensive answer. And we'll see what happens in the future with that when the research is concluded. We'll see what the department come back to us with. Watch this space.
Yeah, there was a system called QRail that suggested that because obviously it's all down to the interlayer between the two, and I think everybody in the industry when the combustibility ban came in, we all thought that it was a kind of knee-jerk reaction with the glazing, but what would suggest it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction was the fact that they've considered it and continue to sit on the fence. So they must think there's a risk there somewhere. But I think the majority of us mortals are looking at it and think, well, I can't remember the last time I saw, an inferno of burning laminated glass. And you just, I don't get it. But QRail was certainly, I think they were certainly claiming that the interlayer had an A2, and I think you said something about there was some issues regarding its longevity. Was that?
Yeah, I think it had to have some sort of top rail to protect it from UV, but nobody wanted to come out and say, yeah, this is definitely conforms. The science gets quite intense when they're trying to justify something. So I'll put that your way, Les, if anything comes in. That's for sure.
Well, nobody's tried to specify it yet. It's the tendency at the moment. The tendency at the moment is steel. It's either steel or rendered concrete.
Yeah, just for convenience.
Yeah, nobody's given it a go with this Q rail yet.
Oh well, watch this space, as I say, and we'll
Exactly.
keep all our contacts informed.
Okay, thanks, Trevor and Les. We did have 3 more questions in late yesterday. I don't know if we'll get through them all, but we can certainly have a quick look at them. So that's these 3. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll grab the first one. Yeah, well, in blocks of flats over 18 meters above GL that require an evacuation alert system, can a fire alarm system still be installed in the common stairways and corridors? Well, they're 2 completely different systems. I'll start off with the common stairways and corridors and the fire alarm systems that you use there. Those systems there are located, the detection systems there are located in the common areas and the staircase. So when smoke's detected in either of them, then if necessary, if required, depending upon how high the building is, if it's under 11 meters, it may not have any corridor smoke venting. But if it's over 11 meters, then it does require it. And as soon as smoke's detected in that corridor, no alarm goes off. It just opens up the smoke. It just opens up the smoke shaft, whether that's a natural smoke shaft or a mechanical extract smoke shaft, and the AOV in the staircase. So that's a silent alarm. The only alarm that's theoretically going off is the alarm that's in the flat of incident. So and they're theoretically the only people who should be escaping. So, and that's how that alarm system works. Now, the evacuation alert system is a recommendation from Grenfell, because what the criticism of London Fire Brigade was why didn't you evacuate the building? And LFB turned around and said, well, how, without endangering our people? And so this is basically part and parcel of which will be the new draft 9991, which I've already talked to you about, that will require such a system. So the theory is, as far as evacuation is concerned, you would tend to evacuate above and below an incident where compartmentation is breached. So where compartmentation tends to be breached is where windows are stacked over one another, so it breaks through the window and hops into the next apartment. So that's possible. Obviously, a new building or even an existing building that's had remedial measures as a result of EWS external wall surveys, it's unlikely that it will spread like what Grenfell did. So the idea is that now on the new buildings over 18 meters that's subject to the new 9991, that under those circumstances, if they think that there's compartmentation breach, they can evacuate 2 floors. They can evacuate the floor above or the floor below, or alternatively, if you think it's appropriate, they'll evacuate the whole building. So that's the difference between the fire alarm and the evacuation alert system. Hopefully that's clear.
Right, shall I take turns with the next one?
Yeah, I didn't want that one, Trev. That's why I took the first one.
Oh, excellent. Right, so please could you clarify if a timber frame construction, i.e. with rock wool or mineral wool insulation, can still be used in flats up to 18 meters from ground level?
Why would you have timber frame at that height?
Oh, hello. Somebody wants to answer instead. No problem. Probably superior intellect. Chip in.
You've got a heckler,
No,
Trev.
it's gone quiet. All right, I'll answer it anyway then. So, yeah, we're talking about flats. We're talking about how the new regulations will affect flats up to 18 meters. Obviously, over 18 meters, we know Reg 7 cuts in, and the whole wall construction, external wall, has to be A1 or A2. Well, with the new changes that flats over 11 meters, whilst they don't have to be non-combustible constructions in their entirety, they are required to have an external surface that is A1, A2. So that doesn't preclude the use of timber frame, even though a lot of people got quite excited about, you know, when B4 was being discussed and there was a lot of vague, non-guidance from government about how you accord with B4. It's quite clear you need to get your fire resistance to the external wall. It's an element of structure, and you need 30 minutes stability up to 5 meters or 60 minutes above that. But you can achieve that with a timber frame construction. So as long as you abide by that rule about the external surface and have an A1, A2 surface, and that would include balconies and attachments, things like that, then you're okay. So I think the answer is a short answer is yes. They're still viable. Do you agree with that, Mr. Ryder?
Seems good to me.
Good.
And the last one, in the revised December Part B document, is it no longer acceptable for a PIR cord sandwich panel to travel across a compartment wall regardless of the purpose group, e.g. industrial units, non-sleeping risk? We couldn't find anything that prohibits this. And it's still, you know, I'm an ex-steel fabricator. We put these types of buildings up, you know, considerable amount of these buildings. And even now, Kingspan quad core is probably one of the most go-to PIR sandwiched insulation boards for, or panels, I should say, not boards, for industrial buildings. And we've had no inkling that if, say, for example, putting up some 6 or 7 industrial units with compartment walls in between the tenancies, you know, generally we take that, you know, that 1 hour compartment wall up to the underside of those the panels, because they are the surface is non-combustible, and fire stop them accordingly. So not as far as we're aware.
Yeah, I'd second. I wasn't aware of any changes in the new ADB which would affect that compartment wall detail where with junction with the roof. So, but there's a lot of building control people in the audience possibly, and if anybody knows anything we don't, then show us up by all means and let us know, and we will pass that on.
I think my steel buddies would have been going mental by now. They would have been kicking off by now.
They probably would have anyway, but there you go.
That's probably right.
So we got through it, and decent timing, just about.
A lot better timing than last time.
Yeah, that's a fact.
God might be able to take some questions from the floor if you fancy it.
Yeah, we've got a bit of time if anybody wants to chip in, discuss anything that we've covered today. Yeah,
or any anecdotes or comments, you know, and further information that we may not have covered in the answers.
No, we usually do webinars, so this is your opportunity in a meeting to speak up.
But you don't have to say anything. Don't have to give us any really difficult questions that we'll struggle with.
They're all screens switched off. They're fast asleep snoring.
Yes, just a lullaby.
Hi.
I've got a question for you. Peter Hook from Southern Building Control. Thank you for your answers, because I did ask one of the questions. They're very comprehensive. That's very, very helpful, and your information is really, really good. I wondered if you had any information on whether there's going to be anything in the regs around electrical vehicle charging and the fire risks associated, and equally, you know, sort of lithium batteried sort of scooters, whatever, which tend to get stored in common areas. Is there any consideration in that regard at all? Do you know about?
Peter, that's a great question. I was at a CABE conference about a week ago, where they had a speaker from RISC, the risk people, and he gave a paper on effectively the precautions that could be taken, you know, for electric charge points, but we've got no official guidance. And I know that the fire brigade are really concerned about this at the moment. We've got a scheme in the county that has that it's public car park, and the fire brigade are really concerned about the charge points, but like I said, we've and as you know yourself in building control, they've been very quick to put the Part S together. Without that much, with not that much thought really to the fire safety implications of lithium-ion batteries, and the chances of them, discharging in an uncontrolled manner is probably the best way to describe it. But nothing official, just these guidance where they were talking about. If you do have charge points, then a little bit more distance in between. But the distance between them that Risk was talking about was more excessive than what the beam counters who were looking at car parking spaces would like. And even to the point that we're talking about 1 hour fire resistant boxes for these charge points. And of course, they were looking at it purely from a property protection situation, because they saw what happened to the arena car park in Liverpool. If the car park is full, that fire could go very, very quickly, to the point where it's almost uncontrollable, like it was at the Liverpool arena. So it's got everybody but concerned, but nobody's producing any guidance that's helping us out at the moment. That's my feeling, and I don't think. Have you found anything come your way, Trev?
No, I think it's a great question, and I think there is a risk. I think my old mucker Ashley Theakston just put something up on the chat that there is some sort of guidance. I glimpsed and missed it, but it might be RICS or something has come forward with that.
That was the authority.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah,
so that's it. That's all there is, and that's possibly not as comprehensive as it needs to be. No, it's a good point made, and you can have blocks of flats with car parks with 50 plus charging points in, and we know that they present a risk. And is it going to wait for a fire for us to then get another knee-jerk reaction to sort out the hazard? Let's hope not. Let's hope somebody thinks it through.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're on the hour, so we round up for today. One more session left before Christmas. That's on the 14th of December, on the approved documents FLONS. So there are a few spaces left on that one. If anybody wants to join us for that, do go along to our website on our events page, and you can register from there. But thanks for coming, and I hope you've found it useful.
Yeah, thanks all. Nice to see you all, and hopefully you'll be able to make the next one. And in the meantime, stay well.
Thank you.
All the best.